Okay, this next chapter that we're going over for this week, if you have not reviewed yet, is going to be on cells. So remember what we did was we started from the most simplest, which is going to be an atom, and then we put a couple of atoms together like hydrogen and oxygen, and we got ourselves a water molecule. Then we had a whole bunch of longer molecules that were made from monomers. They turned into polymers. Those were going to be the macromolecules. Remember, we had those four macromolecules: carbs, fats, proteins, and nucleic acids. Then you can put all those macromolecules together and you're going to get what are called organelles. And organelles are like little baby parts of a cell that allow a cell to function. You put all those together, that gives you a cell. That's our next thing. The cell is the kind of smallest functional living unit that we have of anything. Every living thing is made up of cells. Then we're going to put those cells together and we're going to go to the tissue chapter. And then after that, we're going to get up to the organ systems levels. And we're going to do organ systems for the rest of the semester or the rest of anatomy and physiology. So a cell is kind of where most of the magic happens in our body is it happens at the cellular level, at the tissue level, at the molecular level. So what we need to do is we need to understand the inner workings of a cell and how they work together. So if you think about cells in our body, think about different types of cells that we have. We have what? Like just think. Can you name one in your head? We have skin cells, right? We have brain cells, we have nerve cells, we have muscle cells, we have liver cells, we have lung cells. We have basically 200 different types of cells in the human body. So if we think about them, they're all cells, but if you think about say, a nerve cell and a muscle cell, or a muscle cell and a skin cell, they're both cells, but they work very differently. A skin cell is going to be important for, protecting our body, and then a muscle cell is going to be important for contraction. Even though they are both cells, what makes them different is going to be the different types of organelles that are found inside that cell. So let's look at a picture of a cell. So I can tell you right now, if you want to do well on your next exam, the best way to do that is basically to know all the organelles that are inside your cell and then be able to tell me the function of them. Now, there's only like, I think like a 10 to 14 of them. So if you go ahead, I'll light here, I'm sitting in here dark like a weirdo. Um, so you should go through your cells and I would actually be able to draw it. I think, I know I'm gonna like beat a dead horse here, but I would be able to take a piece of paper, draw a cell, and you all have seen, if you've watched any of these videos, you've seen how terrible I draw. Don't, it doesn't need to be perfect, just as long as it gets the job done, right? Like draw a cell, you draw a circle with a cell membrane, then you get the nucleus, and then you have an endoplasmic reticulum, and then you could do a Golgi complex, and then you could do a mitochondria, and then a lysosome. Like, do that, and then label each of the parts, and then on like another sheet of paper, write the function out. And if you can do that, you're going to get all the questions right. Not, I mean, you're not going to get all the questions right on the test, but you're going to get all of those questions right. And they generally like to ask a lot of those questions on the test. So it would behoove you to learn all of those different organelles. And we're going to go through them together. Or, well, I mean, I guess we're not together, but you know what I mean. So the first thing that we can look at is just kind of the general parts of a cell. There are three main parts. There's a cell membrane. Without a cell membrane, we wouldn't have a cell. It has to delineate the difference between cell and not cell. Oh, step back here. Something they've added, and I'm not sure why they did this inside of your EDAPT, but they did. So there's a prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell. You should know the differences between those. Prokaryotic cells are usually bacteria or microorganisms. Something that they have is they have a cell wall. Humans or our cells do not have cell walls. Oh man, is it already 5 o'clock? Oh no, it's only 4:20. Um, The prokaryotic cell can basically live on its own. It can be a single cell. Most of our cells, they don't live alone. They rely on other cells to allow it to function. So make sure that you can go through and tell the differences. I would have a list of things that I would be able to do. I'd make like a little checklist. One of them is, can I draw a cell? Can I label it? And can I tell you all the functions? The next thing would be like, can I tell the difference between a prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell? Can I write that out? Now we go through what are the main parts of the cell. So there's a cell membrane, and we have a phosphobilipid layer. We learned about that in the last chapter. That has that amphipathic. There's two sides to it. If we look down here, we see that there's the hydrophobic or hydrophilic head that loves water, and then you have the nonpolar hydrophobic tails. They are going to go to the inside. So if we check that out, we can see that we've got right here. So we can see in this picture right here that this cell membrane has one layer of phospholipids and another layer of phospholipids. And what that's going to do is that's going to keep things out that don't need to be in there, and it's going to keep things in that need to be in. So when we look at this phosphobilipid layer, this is gonna, we should know the functions of the cell membrane. So, and we'll talk about those in a minute. So the cell membrane is called what is selectively permeable. And what does that mean? Well, it's going to be picky about the things that can go in and out of it. What can directly, so remember diffusion? Diffusion is the ability for things to pass from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. There are some things that can directly pass through this membrane. One of them is small fatty molecules. So fatty molecules can generally absorb because they're nonpolar, so they can pass through that fatty membrane. Something else that can pass through are small molecules like CO2 and O2. So you'd want CO2 to be able to get out easily. You'd want O2 to be able to get in very easily. If something is too big or it is charged like potassium, well, generally we're going to find potassium inside the cell. Ignore that for a second. Or sodium, or even something like glucose, which is a bigger molecule. That can't pass through, so we're going to need some proteins that are going to allow it to transport through in and out of the cell. So let's come back to that for a second. So that cell membrane is going to do all of those things. It's going to keep stuff out. It's going to keep stuff in. It's going to regulate what goes in and out. Inside of the cell are a couple of things. There's this stuff called the cytoplasm. Now, we have these two terms. You have cytoplasm and cytosol. It might be kind of confusing to see cytoplasm, cytosol. What's the difference between the two? I always wondered. Well, cytosol is like a goo that is inside that cell membrane. The cytoplasm is going to be the cytosol combined with all of the organelles that are floating around in there. So that is what your cytoplasm is. It's the cytosol is the jello, and the organelles are like the pieces of fruit. If you've ever had like a jello salad, I don't know if anybody has it, if anybody still makes those. That's like a 70s thing. Then inside, you're going to have the nucleus, and the nucleus is going to be the home of our DNA. Okay, so we looked at the cell membrane. We already said phosphobilipid layer, amphipathic molecule, hydrophilic heads, hydrophobic tails. What can pass through? Lipids and small molecules, CO2 and O2. So an example of a fatty molecule, something like T3 and T4. These are our thyroid hormones. They can directly pass through the cell membrane. There's also going to be cholesterol in here that's going to stiffen the membrane up. Now, there are going to be some proteins that are, if you think about this, this is kind of almost like a ball pit. It kind of like you go to like one of those kids play places or I take my kids there all the time. I think they're gross. I can't think about it, like all the germs and things and the thing and the this is probably where my kids get sick is like going to these things. There's like somebody that's just like got snot and boogers all over that stuff, and my kids are just like swimming through it. That's kind of what this is like. It's like a little ball pit, and you're gonna have proteins that are kind of floating around in it. And there's different types of proteins that we have. We can have things that are going to be like receptors that are going to be sitting on the outside of the cell, like something like this. So sometimes the cell, we have a lot, we have communication in our body. Our cells have to communicate with each other. Our brain has to communicate with our cells. And so the cells have like little receptors that are going to sit outside waiting for molecules to bind to it to tell it to do something. So for example, we need to get glucose into our cells but it can't pass through this membrane. So we have these receptors in there that are called GLUT4 receptors. And what they do is that insulin binds to it, and now it's going to allow for the uptake of glucose. You're going to see receptors when we get into the muscle chapter with for acetylcholine. You're going to see receptors for neurotransmitters. It's going to be very important later in your anatomy and physiology career. We also have proteins that are going to be enzymes that are going to be sitting in the cell membrane. So, for example, we have an enzyme that's going to be called acetylcholinesterase. And what it's going to do, it's going to break down acetylcholine. Um, then we're going to have channel proteins because we're going to need to get things like sodium into the cell, but since it's charged, it can't pass through the membrane. So what's going to happen is you're going to have these channels that are going to allow things to go in and out. So the membranes have tons of different functions. So you can see here, like for membrane transport, which we're going to talk about in this chapter. So we can have things that diffuse right through. We already saw that. Then you can have stuff that's called facilitated diffusion, where you're going to, instead of things just diffusing through, you're going to have a protein that's going to work as a channel that's going to allow the whatever substances to pass through. Then we're going to talk about this active transport proteins a little bit later. So let's discuss the different organelles that we have. Sorry, these are new notes here. Okay, so we'll come back to cell transport in a little bit. Okay, so when they made these notes, they're telling you right now, know the organelles and the functions. So let's talk about organelles and functions right now. So there are several types of organelles that we have. There are going to be membrane-bound organelles. They're going to be non-membrane organelles. But let's discuss how a cell works for a sec. So let's talk about, actually, let's stop and then I'll make this into different videos.